The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the nervous energy of 1,000 different species, each representative fidgeting in their own unique way. The Zephyrians clicked their crystalline claws against their seats, while the gas-based Nebulans shifted their containment suits restlessly. At the center of the massive dome, a holographic display showed the nightmare that had kept every civilized world awake for months. The Devourers had returned. Admiral Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, watching the chaos unfold around her. Her weathered hands remained folded in her lap, but her dark eyes tracked every movement, every gesture of panic from the assembled aliens. She had fought in 3 galactic wars, survived the Proxima incident, and earned more medals than she cared to count. Right now, she was watching the most powerful civilizations in known space act like frightened children. "The situation is impossible," announced Counselor Vextar, the hegemony's primary representative. His 4 arms gestured wildly at the hologram showing the approaching fleet. "Our combined forces barely stopped them 2 centuries ago. They have returned with 10 times the numbers." The display rotated slowly, showing the massive black ships that had emerged from dark space 6 months ago. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, covered in organic growths that pulsed with sickly light. The Devourers didn't just destroy planets, they consumed them, converting all matter and energy into more ships, more weapons, more hunger. "The collective's computational models show a 0.23% probability of successful defense," reported the synthetic voice of the AI representative. "This assumes full cooperation from all member species and optimal resource allocation. Current cooperation levels reduce success probability to 0.09%. A wave of despair rippled through the chamber. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now allies out of pure necessity, but old grudges died hard. The Stellar Union refused to share their shield technology with the hegemony. The Crystal Confederacy demanded guarantees that their colony worlds would receive priority protection. Everyone wanted someone else to take the biggest risks. Sarah watched a Thornback diplomat literally tear pieces off himself in distress, scattering metal shavings across the floor. The humans had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years, newcomers by galactic standards. Most species still saw them as primitive upstarts who had gotten lucky with faster-than-light travel. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols," suggested Ambassador Quillix of the Maritime Federation. Her tentacles writhed nervously as she spoke. "Identify the most strategically important populations and relocate them beyond the Devourer's projected expansion route." "You mean abandon 70% of inhabited space?" roared General Kravik, the war beast representative. His massive frame shook with barely contained rage. "Let them consume everything we've built over 10,000 years?" "Better than total extinction," Quillix shot back. "The projections are clear. We cannot win this fight." Sarah had heard enough. She stood up slowly, her simple black uniform stark against the elaborate costumes of the other delegates. The movement was subtle, but something about it caught attention. Conversations began to quiet as eyes turned toward the human section. "Counselor Chen," acknowledged Speaker Mordain, the ancient being who presided over the council. "Does humanity have input on these evacuation proposals?" Sarah looked around the chamber, taking in the thousands of faces, some humanoid, others utterly alien. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, probably working in her garden right now. She thought about the colonies humanity had built over the past decades, the dreams and hopes of billions of people who had never even seen an alien but trusted their leaders to protect them. "With respect, Speaker Mordain," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "humanity won't be participating in any evacuation." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the constant environmental sounds of the various life support systems seemed to pause. "I'm sorry," said Counselor Vextar. Did you say you won't evacuate? Even the most optimistic projections show the Sol system will be in the Devourer's path within 18 months. That's correct, Sarah replied calmly. We're staying. But that's suicide, exclaimed Ambassador Quillex. Your species barely has 50 ships capable of interstellar warfare. The mathematics are indisputable. Sarah smiled then, and somehow that expression was more unsettling than any of the panic she'd witnessed. Mathematics assumes you know all the variables. General Kravik leaned forward in his massive chair. The war beasts had fought alongside humans in several smaller conflicts and had developed a grudging respect for their tactics. What are you planning, human? We're going to stop them, Sarah said simply. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages, translators struggled to keep up, and several species began rapidly evacuating their sections. The humans, all 12 of them, sat calmly in their seats as chaos reigned around them. Speaker Mordane's voice boomed over the commotion, enhanced by the chamber's systems until it physically vibrated through everyone present. Order! There will be order in this chamber! As the noise died down, the ancient speaker fixed his multifaceted gaze on Sarah. Counselor Chen, I must ask for clarification. When you say stop them, do you mean delay their advance to buy time for evacuation? No, Speaker. I mean we're going to destroy the Devourer fleet. All of it. This time the silence lasted longer. Sarah could see the mental calculations happening behind alien eyes. Humanity's entire space force consisted of 47 capital ships, maybe 300 smaller vessels, and a handful of orbital defense platforms. The approaching Devourer fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. The human fleet represents approximately 0.31% of combined galactic military capacity, the AI representative noted helpfully. Their proposed action appears to be based on insufficient data or psychological breakdown under stress. Sarah's smile widened. You know what I've learned in 50 years of military service? Everyone has a plan until humans get involved. Commander Wei Jiang, sitting beside her, leaned back in his chair with obvious amusement. Admiral, I think you're scaring them. Good, Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off the assembled delegates. They should be scared, just not of us. Counselor Vextar's four arms moved in what Sarah had learned was the hegemony equivalent of a nervous breakdown. This is madness. You cannot possibly believe 12 humans can accomplish what our combined civilizations cannot. Oh, there won't be 12 of us, Sarah said casually. The Council can go ahead with evacuation plans. Take anyone who wants to leave. We'll handle the Devourers. How? The question came from High Priest Zalmoth of the Sacred Geometries, a species known for their logical approach to warfare. What could humanity possibly do that we cannot? Sarah stood up again, this time walking to the center of the chamber. The holographic display of the Devourer fleet rotated around her as she spoke, making her look impossibly small against the scale of the threat. Every species here has been fighting the same way for centuries, she began. Careful strategies, calculated risks, measured responses. You fight like you have something to lose. She gestured at the hologram. The Devourers don't think like that. They're not careful or measured. They're pure aggression, pure hunger. You can't beat that with caution. So what do you propose? Asked General Kravik, genuine curiosity in his voice. We're going to be crazier than they are. The Thornback delegate's metallic voice crackled with disbelief. Crazier than a hive mind that consumes planets? Sarah nodded. Much crazier. See, you all think of this as a war. Wars have rules, strategies, acceptable losses. But humans? She looked around the chamber. When humans say we'll handle something alone, we're not declaring war. We're declaring that the problem stops existing. She walked back toward her seat, pausing at the edge of the human delegation. The difference is this. Every species here is asking, how do we survive the Devourers? Humans are asking, how do we make sure nothing like the Devourers ever threatens anyone again? Commander Zhang stood up beside her. We've already begun preparations. Our fleet will depart Sol system in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Counselor Vexitar's voice pitched higher than usual. That's nowhere near enough time to develop new weapons or strategies. Who said anything about new weapons? Sarah asked. We're humans. We specialize in using old weapons in ways that terrify everyone, including ourselves. She headed for the exit, her delegation following. As they reached the chamber doors, she turned back one final time. To answer your earlier question, Speaker Mordain, you asked if humanity had input on evacuation proposals. She paused, letting her words carry through the vast space. Our input is this. Evacuate anyone who can't stomach watching what humans do when we stop playing nice. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. High Priest Zalmoth was the first to speak. Are they insane? Probably, General Kravik replied thoughtfully. But I've seen humans fight. When they say they'll handle something alone... He trailed off, lost in memory of the Kepler campaign, where 3 human ships had somehow destroyed an entire pirate fleet through tactics that violated several laws of physics and at least 1 peace treaty. What should we do? Asked Ambassador Quilex. Speaker Mordain's ancient voice carried centuries of wisdom and just a hint of what might have been anticipation. We prepare evacuation ships, and we pray to whatever gods we follow that the humans succeed. Because if they fail, he gestured at the holographic fleet, we'll all have front-row seats to the end of civilization. Counselor Vextar looked around the chamber at thousands of worried faces. And if they succeed? General Kravik's species didn't usually smile, but something similar crossed his features. Then we'll have front-row seats to something the galaxy has never seen before. Humans with nothing to lose, and a really good reason to be angry. In the human delegation's private chambers, Admiral Chen sat reviewing reports from Earth. Production facilities were operating at maximum capacity. Every human colony was contributing resources. The entire species was mobilizing for something that, on paper, looked like elaborate suicide. Commander Zhang pulled up tactical displays, showing fleet positions and projected engagement zones. The other species think we're crazy. We are crazy, Sarah replied without looking up from her reports. That's the point. The Devourers expect resistance. They expect strategy and tactics and careful planning. They don't expect someone to punch them in the face with a star. Admiral, Zhang said carefully, you do realize that most of our own people think this plan is insane too? Sarah finally looked up, her expression serious for the first time since entering the council chamber. Wei, in my experience, the only difference between bravery and insanity is whether it works, and this is going to work. How can you be so sure? She gestured at the tactical displays, showing the massive Devourer fleet approaching from dark space. Because we're not fighting them the way they expect to be fought. Every civilization they've encountered has tried to match their strength, outgun their ships, outmaneuver their fleets. Classic military thinking. And that's not what we're doing? Sarah's smile returned. And this time, Zhang felt a chill run down his spine. Wei, we're not fighting their ships. We're not even fighting them. We're fighting the laws of physics themselves. And we're betting that when humans decide physics are optional, reality tends to agree with us. Outside their viewport, stars wheeled slowly through space, beautiful and peaceful. In 6 weeks, those same stars would witness something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire species deciding that an impossible problem simply needed to become someone else's problem. Permanently. The Galactic Council continued their evacuation planning late into the cycle, but every delegate found their thoughts returning to the humans' calm certainty. In a universe full of cautious civilizations, humanity stood alone in their willingness to look at overwhelming odds and respond with cheerful insanity. The galaxy was about to learn why. When humans declared they'd handle something alone, everyone else started clearing the area. 6 weeks later, the evacuation was in full swing across 36 star systems. Massive transport ships loaded with refugees from every corner of known space jumped to hyperspace coordinates deep in neutral territory. The lucky ones had berths on ships heading toward the galactic rim. The unlucky ones huddled in cargo holds, hoping someone would remember to bring food. High above Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the final preparations. Around her, 46 other human warships hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh modifications that no other species had been allowed to inspect. The human fleet looked ridiculously small against the backdrop of space, less firepower than a single hegemony dreadnought. "Status report," Sarah called out. "All ships report ready," Commander Zhang replied from the tactical station. "Engineering confirms all modifications are operational. Navigation has the jump coordinates locked in." "Medical Bay reports 100% crew readiness," added Lieutenant Morrison. "And Admiral, we're getting communication requests from about 40 different news organizations." Sarah almost laughed. Even facing extinction, the galaxy's media wanted interviews. "Tell them we'll give them a story worth telling. Comms, any word from the Council?" Speaker Mordain transmitted his final message an hour ago, reported the communications officer. Quote, "May whatever gods watch over madmen grant you success." End quote. "Religious blessings from a species that doesn't believe in gods," Zhang observed. "I think we've officially crossed into uncharted territory." Through the viewport, Earth spun slowly beneath them. Sarah could see the lights of cities, the swirl of weather patterns, the blue marble that had given birth to the most stubborn species in known space. In 12 hours, that world would either be safe forever or it would be the last thing any human ever saw. "Admiral Chen," called out the sensor operator, "we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions. The evacuation fleets are jumping out." On the main screen, ships from dozens of different species winked out of existence as they fled to safety. The mighty hegemony fleet, 300 ships strong, vanished into hyperspace. The Crystal Confederacy's geometric vessels followed. One by one, every major power in the galaxy abandoned the field to humanity. "Well," Sarah said quietly, "there's no going back now. Signal all ships. Execute Operation Punchline." What followed was something no other species could have conceived, let alone attempted. The human fleet didn't jump toward the approaching Devourer armada. Instead, they jumped directly into the nearest star. Not near the star, into it. High Priest Zalmoth watched the tactical display in his species monitoring station, safe in neutral space. His mathematical mind tried to process what the sensors were showing, but the data made no sense. "Are the humans committing suicide?" asked his aide. "I don't think so," Zalmoth replied slowly. "Look at the readings." The star, a perfectly ordinary yellow dwarf, was behaving in ways that violated everything the sacred geometries understood about stellar mechanics. Its magnetic field was fluctuating wildly, solar flares were erupting in perfect geometric patterns, and the star's output was increasing by measurable percentages every few minutes. "Sir, I'm detecting artificial gravity wells forming inside the star's corona." "That's impossible," Zalmoth said automatically, then caught himself. When dealing with humans, impossible seemed to be more of a suggestion than a law. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Chen watched her engineering teams work their magic. The modifications to human ships hadn't been weapons or shields. They'd been massive gravitational manipulators, devices that could survive inside a star's corona and reshape space-time itself. "Gravity anchors holding steady," reported Chief Engineer Martinez. "We've got 47 stable field generators operating at 112% of theoretical maximum." "How are we not dead?" asked Lieutenant Morrison, staring at readings that showed them swimming through plasma hot enough to vaporize planets. "Because humans are too stubborn to die," Sarah replied calmly, "especially when we're in the middle of proving a point. Navigation? Confirm our target coordinates." "Locked in, Admiral. The Devourer fleet will arrive at the designated intercept point in exactly 4 hours. 17 minutes. What the human fleet was doing defied every principle of space warfare ever developed. Instead of meeting the enemy in open space with weapons blazing, they were turning a star into the largest weapon the galaxy had ever seen. Gravitational manipulators pulled solar material into precise formations, while magnetic field generators channeled the star's energy output into focused beams of destruction. "Admiral," Zhang called out, his voice tight with concentration, "we're getting readings from the Devourer fleet. They've detected the stellar anomalies." "Good," Sarah said. "I was worried we weren't being obvious enough." On his monitoring station, General Kravik of the War Beasts watched in fascination as the human fleet essentially weaponized an entire star system. His species prided themselves on aggressive tactics. But this was beyond aggression. This was humans grabbing the fundamental forces of the universe and using them as a club. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Devourer fleet is altering course. They're moving to investigate the stellar disturbance." "Of course they are," Kravik growled with something like admiration. "The humans are using the Devourer's own nature against them. They can't ignore a stellar-scale energy source. It represents too much potential food." The Devourer fleet that emerged from hyperspace was even more terrifying than the projections had suggested. Tens of thousands of organic ships, each one pulsing with hunger, oriented toward the star where humanity had taken position. The largest vessels were the size of small moons, covered in feeding tendrils that could strip a planet bare in hours. But they had never encountered prey that fought from inside a star. "Contact!" called out the sensor operator on the Defiance. "Devourer fleet dropping out of hyperspace at maximum range." "Signal all ships," Sarah ordered. "Begin stellar compression sequence." What happened next rewrote several textbooks on stellar mechanics. The human fleet, scattered throughout the star's corona, activated gravitational manipulators that had been charging for 4 hours. Instead of trying to escape the star's gravity, they used it, compressing specific regions of stellar material while creating controlled gravitational vortices that channeled the star's energy output. The result was a star that suddenly began behaving like the galaxy's largest directed energy weapon. Focused beams of stellar plasma, contained within artificial magnetic fields and accelerated by gravitational lenses, reached out across space toward the Devourer fleet. Each beam carried the energy output of a small star, because that's exactly what it was. "First salvo away," reported the weapons coordinator, as if discussing a conventional missile strike rather than weaponized stellar fire. The Devourer's organic ships were designed to absorb and consume energy, but they had evolved to handle planetary sources, nuclear weapons, fusion reactors, even the waste heat from civilizations. They were not designed to directly consume a star's core temperature delivered at light speed. The first wave of Devourer ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged. They encountered temperatures and energy densities that converted their organic matter into component particles in milliseconds. "Enemy fleet is scattering," Zhang reported. "They're trying to present multiple targets." "Adjust firing solutions," Sarah ordered calmly. "Weapons, give me a rotating bombardment pattern. I want those beams sweeping through their formation like a lighthouse." The star, under human control, began rotating its output. Massive beams of destruction swept through space, tracking the fleeing devourer ships with inhuman precision. When the organic vessels tried to group together, gravitational pulses disrupted their formations. When they attempted to rush the star, magnetic field fluctuations created barriers of solar wind that could strip armor from ships at impossible distances. High Priest Zalmoth watched the battle from his monitoring station, his mathematical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "They're not fighting a fleet," he said in wonder. "They're conducting an orchestra of destruction." "Sir?" his aide asked. "Look at the patterns. Every gravitational pulse is timed to drive the enemy ships into the path of the next energy beam. Every magnetic field fluctuation is calculated to prevent escape while herding them toward maximum damage zones. They've turned stellar mechanics into a form of tactical artistry." On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew worked with the practiced efficiency of humans doing something monumentally insane. The fact that they were controlling a star while floating inside its corona was just another day at the office. "Admiral," Chief Engineer Martinez called out, "we're detecting something weird from the Devourer fleet." "Weird how?" Sarah asked. "They're not just running anymore. The larger ships are starting to move in formation, like they're planning something." Sarah nodded. She had been expecting this. The Devourers were a hive mind. Eventually, they would adapt to even the most impossible situation. "What are they doing?" "It looks like they're trying to coordinate a mass feeding event. All the remaining ships are converging on a single point." "They want to eat each other?" Zhang asked incredulously. "Not each other," Sarah realized. "They want to create a single massive organism, something big enough to absorb our stellar bombardment and convert it into more ships." The tactical display showed the remaining Devourer vessels, still numbering in the thousands, clustering together in space. As they touched, their organic hulls began merging, creating something that defied description, a single entity the size of a small planet, covered in feeding appendages and energy absorption matrices. "Well," Sarah said thoughtfully, "that's new." The merged Devourer entity began moving toward the star, its surface rippling with adaptations designed to handle stellar-level energy input. It was becoming something that could actually survive what humanity was throwing at it. "Admiral, that thing is massive," Morrison reported. "Our current bombardment pattern won't be enough to destroy it before it reaches us." Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the massive entity approach their position. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders, trusting in the human ability to find a solution to impossible problems. "Well," she said finally, "I guess it's time for Plan B." "We have a Plan B?" Zhang asked. Sarah's smile was absolutely terrifying. We're humans floating inside a star, using it as a weapon against planet-eating monsters." "Of course we have a Plan B. In fact, we have Plan C through Z, and most of them are worse." She turned to the engineering station. "Chief Martinez, status on the gravitational resonance generators?" "Standing by, Admiral. Though I should mention that what you're proposing has never been tested, violates about 40 laws of physics, and will probably kill us all." "Noted," Sarah replied cheerfully. "Execute stellar destabilization sequence." If using a star as a weapon had been impressive, what humanity did next was pure madness. Instead of simply channeling the star's energy, they began manipulating its gravitational field to create resonance patterns that destabilized the entire stellar structure. The star began to collapse, not into a black hole or neutron star. The gravitational manipulators prevented that. Instead, it collapsed into a state that shouldn't have been possible, where nuclear fusion accelerated beyond all reasonable limits while remaining contained within an artificially compressed stellar envelope. The result was a star that exploded continuously while remaining intact, releasing energy bursts that dwarfed anything in recorded galactic history. "Holy Mother of Physics," breathed Chief Martinez. "We just turned a star into a continuous supernova." The massive devourer entity, designed to absorb energy, found itself trying to consume the equivalent of multiple supernovae occurring simultaneously. Its organic structure, evolved over eons to handle planetary-scale energy sources, simply couldn't process the input. It began to break apart, not from external damage, but from internal overload. The entity's own feeding mechanisms became weapons against it as stellar-scale energy flooded through its systems faster than they could adapt. In monitoring stations across neutral space, representatives of every major galactic civilization watched humanity accomplish something that redefined the word overkill. They had not simply defeated the Devourer fleet, they had created a weapon that could sterilize entire sectors of space. "Sir," General Kravik's tactical officer reported in a stunned voice, "the Devourer fleet is completely destroyed. All contacts eliminated. And the humans? Still there, sir. Still operating inside what is now technically a controlled stellar detonation that they're using as a lighthouse to signal their survival." Kravik leaned back in his command chair. In 50 years of military service, he had never seen anything like what humans had just accomplished. They hadn't just won a battle. They had weaponized a star, destabilized its core structure, and survived the process. "Open a channel to Admiral Chen," he ordered. On the bridge of the Defiance, surrounded by impossible energies and the wreckage of an entire invasion fleet, Admiral Sarah Chen accepted the incoming transmission. "Admiral Chen," General Kravik's voice came through clearly despite the stellar interference. "The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." "No debt necessary, General," Sarah replied. "We told everyone we'd handle it." "How are you even alive right now?" Sarah looked around her bridge, where her crew was calmly managing the controlled detonation of a star. "General, we're humans. We specialize in surviving things that should definitely kill us. It's what we do." The communication channel carried General Kravik's rumbling laugh across space. "Admiral, when your species is ready to return to normal space, the entire galactic fleet would like to escort you home." "That's very kind," Sarah said. "Though I should mention, we're not quite done here yet." "Not done?" "Well," Sarah explained casually, "we need to make sure this kind of thing never happens again. So we're going to leave a little surprise for any other devourers who might show up." What humanity did next would become legend throughout the galaxy. They left the star in its artificially destabilized state, maintained by automated gravitational manipulators that would continue operating for thousands of years. Any large-scale energy signature approaching the system would trigger an automatic stellar bombardment that made their recent battle look like a gentle warning shot. They had turned an entire star system into a permanent weapon, a lighthouse of destruction that would guard the galaxy long after humanity was gone. When the human fleet finally emerged from the stellar corona 12 hours later, they found the largest gathering of alien ships in galactic history waiting to escort them home. Every species, every civilization, every power that had ever doubted humanity's place in the galaxy was represented. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on her bridge, watching the incredible sight, and allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The galaxy had learned something important that day. When humans declared they would handle a problem alone, they didn't just solve it. They made sure it stayed solved. Forever. 3 months after the Battle of Sol's Fury, as the galactic historians had dubbed it, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. Where once humanity had occupied a small section designated for junior species, they now sat in the inner circle, directly across from Speaker Mordain himself. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Admiral Sarah Chen, now bearing the newly created title of Guardian of the Galaxy, which she found deeply embarrassing, sat quietly reviewing reports. Around her, representatives from every known civilization spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The casual disregard that had marked earlier sessions was completely gone. replaced by something approaching reverence. The change wasn't just political. In the 3 months since humanity had weaponized a star, the galaxy had fundamentally shifted. Trade routes were being redrawn to pass through human space, not because it was necessary, but because everyone wanted the protection of being near the species that could turn suns into guided weapons. The agenda today, Speaker Mordain announced, focuses primarily on reconstruction efforts and the establishment of new security protocols. His ancient voice carried a weight it hadn't possessed before the crisis. Admiral Chen, would you provide an update on the Seoul Defense Network? Sarah stood, conscious that every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. The automated systems are operating within normal parameters. The stellar beacon is functioning as designed, and we've detected no large-scale threats approaching the perimeter. What she didn't mention was that large-scale threats now included anything bigger than a trading convoy. The weaponized star didn't distinguish between invading fleets and particularly ambitious mining operations. Humanity had been forced to establish strict traffic control protocols to prevent accidentally vaporizing friendly visitors. Excellent, Speaker Mordain replied. Now, regarding the technological innovations demonstrated during the crisis, Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony cleared his throat nervously. His forearms fidgeted with data tablets as he spoke. Speaker, the Hegemony Science Council has completed their analysis of human gravitational manipulation technology. We would formally like to request access to this information for defensive purposes. Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Zhang, who had been promoted to Admiral after displaying remarkable composure while coordinating the controlled detonation of a star. Their unspoken communication was clear. Here we go again. Counselor Vexitar, Sarah said carefully, I'm afraid most of our technology isn't actually technology in the traditional sense. I don't understand, Vexitar replied. The gravitational field manipulators, the stellar compression systems, the resonance generators, surely these are devices that can be replicated. Well, Sarah said, glancing around the chamber, the gravitational manipulators were essentially modified mining equipment held together with emergency welds and powered by sheer stubbornness. The stellar compression system was 3 different types of incompatible technology that shouldn't work together but did because we needed it to, and the resonance generators... She paused. Honestly, we're not entirely sure how those work. Chief Engineer Martinez keeps muttering about applied wishful thinking and refusing to explain further. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Representatives began consulting with their technical advisors, trying to understand how humanity had created miraculous weapons out of mining equipment and wishful thinking. High Priest Zalmoth of the Sacred Geometries raised one crystalline appendage. Admiral, are you saying that your stellar manipulation capabilities cannot be reproduced by other species? Oh, they probably can be, Sarah said cheerfully. But you'd need to be completely insane, have absolutely no regard for safety protocols, and be willing to bet your entire civilization on untested theories that violate several fundamental laws of physics. So, human, observed General Kravik, with what might have been amusement. Exactly, Sarah agreed. See, the thing about human technology is that it's not really designed to work. It's designed to work anyway, despite all the reasons it shouldn't. Most species build things to last, to operate within safe parameters, to follow established principles. Humans build things to solve whatever problem is in front of us, and we'll deal with the consequences later. Ambassador Quillix of the Maritime Federation spoke up, her tentacles writhing with curiosity. But surely there must be principles, methodologies, something that can be studied and applied. Admiral Zhang leaned forward. Ambassador, 3 months ago we turned a star into a weapon using equipment that was officially rated for asteroid mining. The official technical manual for our gravitational manipulators says, and I quote, "Do not use near-stellar bodies, gravitational anomalies, or on days ending in Y. We used them for all three simultaneously. How is that possible? Demanded the AI representative, its synthetic voice carrying genuine confusion. The computational models show that such usage should have resulted in immediate cascade failure. It did, Sarah said matter-of-factly. 7 times. We fixed it with spare parts and creative engineering while floating inside a star. Humans are very good at making things work that absolutely should not work. Speaker Mordane's ancient features shifted into what might have been contemplation. This raises interesting questions about the nature of human scientific advancement. Perhaps we should discuss the broader implications. What followed was 3 hours of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations trying to understand how humanity had achieved the impossible through a combination of desperate improvisation, complete disregard for safety, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The conclusions were sobering. According to our analysis, reported the collective's representative, human technology advancement follows patterns that are mathematically impossible. They achieve breakthrough innovations during crisis situations by combining unrelated technologies in ways that should not function. It's not just technology, added Counselor Vextar. Human military doctrine appears to be based on the principle of doing whatever the enemy least expects, regardless of whether it makes strategic sense. Because it usually doesn't, Sarah admitted. Human military strategy is basically figure out what a sensible person would do, then do something completely different. It works because nobody can predict crazy. General Kravik nodded slowly. I fought alongside humans during the Kepler campaign. They won that battle by ramming a cargo ship through a moon. Not around it, through it. When I asked their commander why, he said it seemed like the fastest route. And it was, Zhang pointed out. Saved us 6 hours of maneuvering. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives tried to process this information. They had spent centuries building careful, logical civilizations based on proven principles and calculated risks. Humanity approached problems by asking, what's the most ridiculous solution that might possibly work? And then betting everything on it. This explains so much, whispered Ambassador Quillix to herself. Speaker Mordane called for order. Given these unique capabilities, the Council must address humanity's role in galactic security going forward. What followed was unprecedented in the history of the Galactic Council. Every species present, including those who had been enemies for millennia, unanimously voted to designate humanity as the galaxy's crisis response specialists. In practical terms, this meant that whenever something impossible, unprecedented, or utterly insane threatened galactic civilization, everyone would politely step aside and let humans handle it. We accept the designation, Sarah said formally, with one condition. Name it, Speaker Mordane replied immediately. When we say we're going to handle something alone, everybody stays out of our way. No helpful suggestions, no safety inspections, no committee oversight. Just point us at the problem and let us work. The vote was unanimous. Even the species that prided themselves on careful oversight agreed that human problem-solving methods were best left unsupervised by anyone who valued their sanity. After the formal session ended, smaller groups gathered to discuss the new reality they were facing. In one corner, military leaders from a dozen species compared notes on human tactics. In another, scientists debated whether human engineering principles could even be called science. I've been thinking, General Kravik said to Admiral Chen as they stood near one of the chamber's massive viewports, about what you said 3 months ago about fighting physics themselves. What about it? Sarah asked. You weren't speaking metaphorically, were you? Humans actually do fight the laws of physics when they get in your way. Sarah considered this seriously. Well, we prefer to think of it as negotiating with physics. We explain what we need to accomplish, physics explains why it's impossible, and then we find a mutually acceptable compromise. And if physics refuses to compromise, then we do it anyway and let physics figure out how to catch up later. Kravik's species didn't usually laugh, but he made a sound that might have been close. No wonder the universe bends around you people. Admiral Zhang joined them at the viewport, carrying data tablets filled with new requests from various civilizations. Admiral, we're getting invitations to establish human research stations in about 40 different systems. Everyone wants to study our impossible technology. Any actual emergencies? Sarah asked. 3. The Spiral Coalition is dealing with some kind of space anomaly that's eating their shipping lanes. The outer territories have reported contact with something they're calling living geometry that doesn't respond to conventional weapons. And the Deep Core expedition has stopped transmitting entirely. Last message was, "Found something big, send humans." Sarah smiled. It was the same expression that had terrified the Galactic Council 3 months ago, but now it was becoming a source of reassurance across the galaxy. When humans smiled like that, it meant impossible problems were about to become someone else's concern. Zhang, prep the fleet. Looks like we've got work to do. Which crisis first? He asked. All of them, Sarah replied. We'll split up. I'll take the space anomaly. Sounds like it needs personal attention. You handle the living geometry. Commander Martinez can investigate the deep core situation with a science team. Admiral, Zhang said carefully, we're talking about 3 separate impossible situations that could threaten entire sectors of space. Right, Sarah agreed. Normal Tuesday, basically. As word spread through the chambers that humanity was preparing to tackle 3 galactic-level crises simultaneously, the reaction was no longer panic or disbelief. Instead, delegates began placing bets on which problem would be solved first and what completely insane method humans would use to solve them. The Thornback representative was taking wagers on whether Admiral Chen would weaponize another star. The odds were surprisingly close. You know what I've realized? Ambassador Quillex said to High Priest Zalmoth as they watched the human delegation prepare to leave. When humans say they'll handle something alone, they're not being arrogant. They're being considerate. How do you mean? They're protecting us from having to watch what they do to solve the problem, because if we knew their methods in advance, we'd probably try to stop them. Zalmoth's mathematical mind processed this observation. You're suggesting that human problem-solving is so fundamentally disturbing that they warn other species away for our own psychological safety? I'm saying that 3 months ago, humanity saved the galaxy by turning a star into a continuous supernova using mining equipment, and that was probably one of their more conservative approaches. As the human fleet departed for their multiple impossible missions, Speaker Mordain stood alone in the council chambers, contemplating the fundamental shift in galactic civilization. For centuries, the Council had operated on principles of careful deliberation, calculated risks, and measured responses. They had built a stable, predictable galaxy where problems were solved through committee and consensus. Then humanity had arrived, looked at their stable galaxy, and apparently decided it needed more exploding stars. The strangest part was that it was working. In 3 months, humanity had not only saved civilization, but had somehow made the galaxy safer by making it more dangerous. They had created weapons that could sterilize entire sectors, then used those weapons to guarantee peace. They had demonstrated the ability to rewrite the laws of physics through sheer bloody-mindedness, then offered to use that ability to solve everyone's problems. Speaker Mordain's species had guided galactic civilization for over 10,000 years through wisdom, patience, and careful planning. But they had never accomplished anything like what humanity had done in 50 years through controlled insanity and weaponized stubbornness. Perhaps, he reflected, the galaxy had been too careful for too long. Perhaps it took a species that looked at impossible odds and responded with cheerful defiance to remind everyone that the universe was meant to be reshaped by the audacious. His contemplation was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Spiral Coalition. The space anomaly that was eating their shipping lanes had just consumed an entire star system. In response, Admiral Chen had dispatched a single message: "Hold our position. This looks fun." Speaker Mordain found himself doing something he hadn't done in centuries. He smiled. Because when humans declared that a star-eating space anomaly looked like fun, you could be absolutely certain that the anomaly was about to have a very bad day. The galaxy had learned to live with the fact that humanity's definition of handling something alone usually involved redefining what was possible. And increasingly, everyone was discovering they preferred living in a universe where impossible problems met human solutions. After all, when faced with the choice between careful, logical extinction and reckless, impossible survival, the choice was obvious. The universe belonged to those brave enough, or crazy enough, to punch physics in the face and demand better options.